Cleo.
Hello, I'm Beatrice G. This is my speech for interpersonal communication. So nobody will ever admit it, but when you first meet a person, you judge them automatically, even if you do not want to. And judgment is a version of first impressions. And if you think about it, first impressions is when you meet someone for the first time and you form a mental judgment about them, and you observe people on nonverbal communication. First impressions are very important, can range from interviewing somebody for a job position or just meeting a friend at the playground to play the kid. Nonverbal communication can define relationships, power, and express emotions. Impressions commonly used in ways that can define people, as I will discuss. Firstly, nonverbal communication can define power. One way it can define power is by vocal licks, which is tone, volume, and pitch stated on slv.global. If you meet somebody that is shy and quiet, you would automatically assume that they're introverted, and so that means that they really don't have power in the room that you guys are in. And if somebody has an assertive tone and they have a loud voice, then you would think like they have a lot of power and security. Another way is with artifacts, which is how a person appears physically, which is also how we can judge people. An example is like the clothes that they wear, if they have tattoos, hairstyles. And like if somebody, per se, comes to work with a dirty shirt and like shorts, you would automatically think that they're unorganized and that they're unprofessional. But if somebody comes to work with like a clean, crisp suit, you would think they're highly respected and is a boss. Also, another reason is proxemics, which is the distance between you and the person. And if the person is like very far from you, you would think they're an introvert because there's a low level of familiarity. And since you think they're introvert, you would think there's no amount of power that they have. And impressions of you having the most power in a room is a component for relationships too. Secondly, nonverbal communication can help relationships also. Facial expressions, like factors like first impressions in relationships, it can help. Like the human face is extremely expressive and has hundreds of different emotions, and it can give off many emotions without a word, stated on helpguide.org, and it can make you able to identify if somebody is positive and friendly or negative and grumpy, and it can start friendships or relationships. Another way it can define relationships is by touch, and many messages come from this, like a weak handshake, a big hug, or a hard arm grip, and it can end or start a relationship depending on the person. Another way is when you judge people with nonverbal actions, you can sometimes make wrong judgments about people that can take a turn for the worst. And many people send confusing and negative nonverbal signals without realizing it all the time. And this can make or break the start of a relationship because it leads to misunderstanding. And defining relationships with nonverbal communication during first impressions could turn out very good or bad, but it depends on the definition of emotions. Lastly, nonverbal communication can define expressed emotions. Nonverbal communication can only help someone learn so much about what the person is feeling, if not identified correctly, to semanticscholar.org. Some people can fake their expressions when they're surrounded by people they do not know. Also, seeing what type of emotions they show when reacting to things. Like example, like watching a movie, if you're like on a blind date, if you're watching like a really sad movie and your date doesn't cry, you think they're very closed off and have like a hard personality. Also, different ways to examine emotion. You can scan people in any way to determine how a person feels, if they're shy or if they're uncomfortable in that certain situation. And expressed emotions is a good way to make a first impression about somebody. To conclude, first impressions are part of life and how we socialize with others. Nonverbal communication can create impressions based on relationships, power, and expressed emotions. As Ralph Emerson once said, when the eyes say one thing and the tongue another, a practiced man relies on the language of the first. Thank you. I'm gonna start sweating.